Ladies and gentlemen, you're back. Another episode, fantastic episode of UAP Studies Podcast. As always, my name is Jason. Name's never changed. And we're joined by the mad professor, Dr. Michael Glosson, joining us again, I believe
Not
from
too
his
bad.
living room.
Yeah, I rearranged my office, so
I like it. I like it. It's very
excellent.
stylish.
Yep, the dog is here trying to dig a hole in the floor, so you'll probably hear that.
And
But
you won't see the cats in the back anymore, right?
no, they'll just jump right into the frame, right into the camera frame.
It's the way we do it. We endorse cats. Today, we have a fantastic guest. We have Samuel Chong, who is joining us from California, and we're going to delve into a book. To tell the truth, guys, I had never heard of this book or The
Me neither.
Experiencer. Yeah, this was. We actually got an email from Samuel with the reference, of course, that Grant Cameron said, "Hey, you should check these guys out." And if Grant Cameron says, "Hey, you should check out, Samuel Chong," then I check out Samuel Chong, right? This is
Fascinating guy, Grant Cameron. He's
oh,
amazing.
oh yeah. Like if the endorsement comes in from a top name like that, you check it out. But this story took me back because I had never heard of it before. It took place in Australia, and it's very reminiscent of a case that happened here in I believe 75 is when it happened to this gentleman, but only 40 minutes away from where I live. And I'll mention that later. But we're going to delve into this subject. And the subject in question is this gentleman by the name of Michel Desmarquet, which was born in France in 1931. Of course, he joined the French army after high school, and he did 8 years of service. But then he moved his butt over to Cairns, Australia. And in 1987, he made contact with something from not of this world. The thing is, he wrote a book several years later. It was June 1st, 1985, when his book came out, and it was called the Theabua, hopefully I'm not butchering the name, Theabua Prophecy, The Golden Planet. It's very easy for a book to just be published and you go, okay, this is nonsense. But the thing is, this book has affected a lot of people's lives, Samuel included. And when I looked at the reviews online, although there's not like thousands of reviews, they're all solid. Like 4.6 out of 500 reviews is solid. That means that most people gave it a 5-star. And usually if a book comes out and you're like, look, this seems a little bit too woo-woo, you would not give it a 5-star review unless you're paid to do so. But there's enough information or at least conviction in this book that our guest today here, Samuel Chong, translated the book for China and Taiwan, and it became a #1 bestseller, or at least on the bestsellers list. And that's amazing because now we see that our brothers and sisters in China are also very interested in this subject. We never hear anything from over there, but when you get to hear like Samuel saying, "I translated it over for them," that's huge. That means that their interest is as high as ours. So, Samuel, thank you so much for joining us on UAP Studies Podcast today. I appreciate your time.
Hey,
Yeah,
welcome,
thanks.
Samuel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I want to get into, I just broke my pen here and noticed that. I want to get into how you came across this book, what made you buy the book, and then the consequences of reading the book.
Well, in my subconscious mind, when I was young, I always looked for answers of the paranormal and mysteries of the world. So I was thinking if the ETs could come and visit us, we could just learn from them their technologies and the answers of all the mysteries. I was always looking for a book written by ET contactees that would answer all the questions I had in mind. So in China, I didn't find that book, but after I came to the US, one day I was surfing on the internet and found this book on Amazon. But at that time, it was titled Abduction to the Next Planet. And by that time, I read so many books already, but those books really didn't answer the questions I had in my mind. But this book, I checked it out from a library because it was selling very expensively, like $200 or so on Amazon.
Wow.
So I borrowed it from a library and I checked it out and I couldn't put the book down because it answered all the questions I had in mind, including like who built the Great Pyramid of Egypt, for what purposes, and what happens in the Bermuda Triangle, why so many ships and planes disappear, and why so many people vanish in the national parks in the US and Canada. What about the human energy field, like the Chinese medicine, like they say your colors of energy don't look well or look well.
Auras or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, auras are human energy fields. And it talks about the religions in on earth, like the Christian religion, what really happened to the two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, why they were destroyed, and who led Moses, who parted the sea for Moses, who led the Hebrews out of Egypt, the Exodus, and who was really Jesus and Christ, and what happened afterwards. So, who really changed the ancient scriptures of the Bible, intentionally or unintentionally, like when and in which council meetings. It's so specific, the information contained in the book, that it really shocked me that I decided to find out more and was not written in the book. Because in the book, in the postscript, it says there are far more incredible things that the author Michel Desmarquet was not allowed to write in the book because we were far from understanding them. That got me extremely curious. That's when I decided to track the author down and then and learn what else he knew but didn't write in the book.
You mean
So
tracked him down personally? You met
personally, I flew
met
to
him.
Vietnam where he was living at that time.
Vietnam.
Yes.
Okay, amazing. You put a
So-
lot of effort into this. Yeah, it must have had quite an effect on you.
Yeah, even though he was French Australian, he after the book got published, he lost his wife. I mean, he had a divorce. That's why some people suggested him to move to a different country to change to a different environment, and that's why he went to Phu Quoc Island in southern Vietnam. But I didn't know exactly where he was living at that time, so I grabbed the photo taken by a tourist who photographed his bungalow, and I showed that photo to the local taxi driver after I landed on that island, and asked the taxi driver to take me there, and that's when I found him.
Wow. So you really just went there not knowing if you're going to catch the guy, and you did. That's crazy.
I took the chance, yes.
But you mentioned in one of the emails, some of the description that he was a little bit annoyed by you, that you tracked him down or something at first, right?
I might be a little frightened. I mean, I'm glad that your interest is in like hearing people's stories and not like avenging people who've wronged you or something, because I think you would be like impossible to escape if you're willing to just fly across the world. So you fly over to Thailand and to like knock on his door?
Yeah, I flew from Los Angeles to Vietnam, and then
Vietnam, sorry.
yeah, and then I actually just waited for him to appear because he was taking an afternoon nap. And when he appeared, he seemed to be a little bit annoyed because he was a very private person.
And Samuel, just so I know, you said after his experience and the book came out, he was divorced. Was the divorce or the separation from his spouse because of his abduction and subsequently the book, or was it just apart from that?
It's related to his abduction experience because his wife didn't believe what happened to him. His wife,
Gotcha.
because he disappeared for 10 days or so. His
Right.
wife was thinking that he was with another woman, but he also had other complications after he came back, psychological complications. So that's why they had a divorce.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. So basically, let's get into Michel Desmarquet's story. How long after he moved to Australia did this event occur for him? And obviously, it was the middle of the night, sort of a typical alien visitation / abduction. I think was the middle of the night when he was awoken to go to his backyard and he doesn't know why, and then meets this entity. So tell us a little bit about his first encounter.
Well, it happened in 1987 in the summer, in June, our time in June, but in Australia it's the winter time. But so
How old is he at this time? He's
he
an
was
adult.
in his 40s or late 40s, early 50s at that time.
Yeah, he's born in 31 and this took place in 87. So yeah, he was 50s, 52, something around those. Yeah, that age. Yeah.
That age. And so he just woke up in the middle of the night. He didn't know why, but he wrote a note to his wife saying that he will be gone for 10 days. And there's absolutely no need to worry about him. And then he walked outside of his house, and then he was lifted up to the middle of the air where he saw a beautiful ET being, 10 foot tall, angelic looking, blonde, wearing a spacesuit. And he also saw like the environment changed suddenly, like it's kind of like in a mist, And this is when he was told that he was taken into a parallel universe in order to prevent his neighbors from seeing him. And they used the parallel universe as a transfer station, I mean, as a hiding place. And he was explained like why so many ships and planes disappear in the Bermuda Triangle. Actually, it's just a natural phenomenon because it's a warp or like a portal into the parallel universe where time stops. And it's very strange because he saw many people wearing medieval clothes, like behaving very strangely, and he also saw others behaving like savages in the parallel universe. And they actually encountered like dangerous situations in which the ETs had to do something to protect the safety of themselves. And I found that to be very interesting because there's a researcher called David Paulides who did researches on the people who just suddenly disappear, who just suddenly vanish in the national parks in the US. And the scenarios are very similar. I mean, time stops and people don't feel pain or hunger or thirst in a parallel universe because what David Paulides found that some of the corpse that they found after they suddenly vanished and reappeared was that they seemed to like didn't feel any pain or the temperature because the bones came out as if they walked to their bones. So it's kind of a lot of interesting details that corroborate with each other. So this makes the story of Michel de Marquet very credible. It also tells a story of a person who was getting water from a well in the backyard of his home in the 1900s, actually in the 1800s or so. And it's actually reported by a newspaper in North America. And it details how the parents was following the footsteps of that teenager. And the footsteps just disappeared out of nowhere because it was snowing. It would be very easy to follow the footsteps. And the parents just heard the sound of the teenager like yelling and shouting, and the sound disappeared farther and farther into the distance, but they couldn't see the boy, the teenager. And that kind of relates to what Michel de Marquet was told, that the parallel universe shaped like a ribbon floating in the atmosphere, and sometimes the UFOs or UAPs use the parallel universe as a way to enter Earth and to leave Earth. So it's like a portal for them to take advantage of.
Nice. So you're saying that he's with these entities, but he ends up staying for 10 days. Does he know that he's gone for 10 days? Like Travis Walton, I don't think was aware that he had been missing for 5 days.
Well, it sounds like he knew he was going to be, because there's a note, right?
Or they made him write it. Yeah, he doesn't know why he wrote it, right?
Yeah, they made him write it, and he was told that he would be gone for 10 days. And then his mission was to report everything that he saw, heard, and experienced, and to write a book. And this is what he did. He followed their instructions to the letter.
And is there a specific reason why they chose Michel as their go-to guy?
There are actually a few reasons. One is that he was he had a sharp mind because I played chess with him. He is really kind of smart and astute, and this is one reason. The other reason is that he according to them had 80 past lives already, and only like people like him could survive for 9 days on their planet, and the explanation wasn't given to him, but they showed him his past lives. He was like a German mining worker, and he was a goldsmith in Japan, like a beggar in Africa, and things like that. And I think it probably has something to do with vibration, but this is just my guess, conjecture. And the other reason is that he didn't have a lot of education. He was a landscaper in Australia who had no information or preconceived notions about ETs or UFOs. So he was just like a blank piece of paper to write on. If they were to take like a politician or ufologist, and they wouldn't probably be sure that they wouldn't be influenced by their personal agendas or opinions on this matter. And the last reason is that he wasn't a physicist. According to Michel Desmarquet, if they were to take like a physicist to their planet, the physicist would be able to reverse engineer their technologies and would like harm us because we are not spiritually ready to develop the technologies that would later destroy us. Because the technologies are just like matches, and they would do good and do harm to us depending on how we use it. So this is what I think. Those are the reasons they chose him.
So catch us up on the story. So he gets abducted out of his home, and like instantly they sort of launch into all of these explanations about like the Bermuda Triangle and auras. And is there like a trajectory of the topics that they went through? Do they just start explaining these things to him, or do they orient him and tell him like, here's why we've abducted you and we're going to show you all these things and then send you back to write a book? Or does he have questions that he's asking them? How does this conversation or this like exchange of information play out in the story?
So because they first took him to a parallel universe where their UFOs or the spacecraft was stationed at, they explained to him what the parallel universe was about. So, and then after he entered into their spacecraft, they disinfected him using yellow light and blue light. Also, they took his astral body out of his physical body, so he had an out-of-body experience in which they did further disinfections on his physical body. And then after everything was ready, after his astral body comes back to his physical body, this while everything was happening, like they were on the journey, Michel Desmarquet had a lot of questions about his trip, like whether he was going to come back or not, and things like that, and which they explained to him that he was going to come back sound and safe, and also other explanations as well, like how fast they were traveling, like how they travel at a speed of light or faster than the speed of light. And then after all the questions were answered, they sat in a room in which the main ET called Tao told him about the history of Earth, where the people came from, the blacks, the yellows, the Caucasians, the Polynesians, the Jewish people, where we all came from. We all actually came from other planets originally.
Like
And
each
then,
of them, each well, what I guess would be called race, even though race is kind of a wonky category that doesn't have like a lot of genetic sort of like validity to it. So each of these like skin color group of people came from different planets, is the message that they're giving in?
yes, to a certain extent. In fact, the blacks and the yellows came from a planet called Barkratini about 1.35 million years ago. The blacks landed in was today's Australia, and the yellows landed was now today's southern Myanmar. And those were the earliest inhabitants on Earth. Before that, there were no people, like no human beings, but there were animals on Earth. After that, there was they actually brought a lot of technologies and knowledge from their planet. But then there was a major reset because an asteroid hit Earth and split into three parts about 1.3 million years ago. One part landed in what's now today's Red Sea area. The other part landed in what's now today's East Timor area. The other part landed in the Galapagos Islands area. So the book is very specific with many details that people can verify and check archaeological findings and also plate tectonics. Yeah.
Tectonics. Yeah, you got it.
Tectonics. And so those were the and then the other inhabitants included the ancestors of the Polynesians. They also came from a different planet called called Arima X3, and they landed on Earth about 250,000 years ago. But they encountered the Chinese people who were living on the northwestern corner of that continent called Lemuria, that existed in the Pacific Ocean. That continent actually sunk into the ocean about 14,500 years ago. But back then they established a very successful civilization. They didn't really want to fight against the Chinese, so that's why they retreated back and built the ET stations on the far side of the moon as a transfer station, so they can move their people face by face to the continent of Lemuria. And
For listeners who maybe aren't aware, Lemuria is a sort of like hypothesize. I don't even know if I want to call it hypothesize, but it's at least part of like a kind of like crypto mythological view of human history that includes other. It's sort of adjacent to like Atlantis and ideas like this, that there might have been lost civilizations or something, or a lost continent. So it's really tying together a whole lot of. It's like the whole spider web of weird topics is coming together in one story. It's just amazing. We've got, let's see, like pyramids, astral bodies, auras, the Bermuda Triangle, aliens, time warps, missing persons, like Bible, sort of history, race theory, the ET zoo hypothesis that we're all here sort of brought by different extraterrestrials. We've got like Great Reset theory, the Lemurians, ETs on the moon. Like, yeah, let's keep going, because it just
And
seems
this is 2 years prior to Bob Lazar even putting Area 51 and S4 on the map. So people weren't even close to wanting this kind of information, and it predates the internet. So unless he had a stack of encyclopedias in which he was drawing all his information and conclusions and theories off of,
there are a lot of
this
there are a
is
lot of
very
publications like
impressive.
14 Times and things like that sort of like collect a lot of these ideas together. So there at least would have been like a readership of people who were interested in this kind of like really sprawling story. What year was this again? That he heard
87,
87.
and the
87,
book was published in 1993.
93. Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah.
sorry, keep going. So the last thing was like ETs on the moon.
Yes, so they were ET bases on the far side of the moon because the people from Arima X3 was using that as a transfer station to move their people to Earth, because they had a overpopulation issue on the planet Arima X3. And actually, Michel de Marquet visited that planet on the trip to Thioba, the Golden Planet, and he actually saw something happen there, which 150 years ago, they had a nuclear war that actually wiped out almost their entire population. That actually serves as a warning to us nowadays that we have to grow spiritually to prevent self-destruction. So that's the story about the ancestors of the Polynesians. And they had a lot of interesting technologies. And they built a Great Pyramid that's 3 times the size of the Great Pyramid of Egypt, using anti-gravitational technologies and ultrasonic vibratory systems to cut the huge stones in a very precise manner. And they used the pyramid to make rain, and also as a communication center, energy center, to communicate with people on different planets, because it's an amplifier of signals. It's actually proven by a lot of people who do a lot of study on the pyramids. So the users, like the ancient pharaohs and the users of the pyramid in Lemuria, so they just sit in the middle of the pyramid, they meditate and concentrate, and then they would send their thoughts through the top of the pyramid, in which it amplified the signals of the thoughts to other planets, so that they could communicate with the inhabitants of other planets. And they also had other technologies, such nuclear power, to make light bulbs. So they had like lamps or light bulbs on the streets that never goes off. And so they used like a nuclear energy on that. And actually, if you visit Easter Island, if you see the moas, the statues on Easter Island, and those were actually part of the continent of Lemuria, that they were trying to transport the moas to their capital, which is in the northwestern corner of the continent. But the earthquake struck before they were able to do so, and the entire continent sunk into the ocean. Because the people on Lemuria kept their technologies secret from other people, like the Chinese and the Indians, their technologies were lost when that happened. But you see that in other parts of the world, like in South America, there were like huge stone structures that wouldn't have been able to be built using the ancient technologies back then of the locals. Those were actually built by the colonizers of Lemuria, because they were trying to colonize other parts of the world, and some of them were easier to colonize than others. And this is when the people from Theoba were constantly visiting Earth. And this is why some ancient scriptures describe the chariots of fire and ET beings coming and visiting us back then. So unfortunately, 14,500 years ago, the continent sunk into the ocean, and then the Caucasians actually landed on Atlantis before, and they didn't have a lot of technologies except the technologies like brought by the Lemurians. But there was one person from Atlantis, his name was Thoth, who was a very wise and learned person who had the knowledge to build the Great Pyramid of Egypt.
Thoth, the Egyptian god,
Yes.
Ibis, the big
Yes,
bird.
he was actually not a god, but a person. But with
The
great
bird-looking creature or the walking god thing. Yeah.
It's just a people's imagination. It's just a human being, just a person, regular looking person. He was responsible to build the Great Pyramid of Egypt about 17,000 years ago, using the same technologies that he learned from Atlantis, and in a 9-year period of time. So the ancient pharaohs were able to use the Great Pyramid of Egypt the right way. So they were able to do the same thing that the Lemurians did. But unfortunately, right now, the Pyramid of Egypt is misaligned from before because of the rotations of the magnetic poles of Earth. So even if we are able to use it correctly, we are not able to communicate with people on different planets.
Okay, so the pyramid no longer functions because like the geomagnetic poles of the Earth have shifted over time. That's not something they corrected. We know how to correct for or whatever. So where does this story lead? Like I'm seeing all the like information and sort of like weaving together of all these mysteries and kind of high strange concepts together. Like where does his story lead after he's gotten all of this information? Is it just they return him and he writes this book and that's kind of like the end of it?
Well, the reason for him to write everything down is to serve as a warning to us, because it talks about the real dangers on Earth. It's actually warning us, the ETs are warning us, we have to focus more on the spiritual aspect of our lives. We have to change our ways of living, the directions we are going to, because if we don't change, we are going to be heading a catastrophe. So they talk about the real dangers on Earth. Number 1, money. Number 2, politicians. Number 3, journalists and drugs. Number 4, religions. So they're saying that they're helping us to really get our acts together. And if we don't, then we're going to be
Pay the
heading,
price.
pay the price. Yeah.
I love how number 2 is politicians. You know what I mean? Like number 1, technology and pollution. Sure enough. Number 2, politicians, like that. And it's true because, I mean, 2024, we're seeing all these politicians, all their dirty secrets all starting to come out. And you realize that it's not for the benefit of humanity. They're self-serving in a lot of ways. And this is in every single country, Canada included. I'm included in my own country because you see the way, you know, Trudeau is, and you see the way the States are, and China. Every country is in it for themselves. All political leaders are in it for themselves. And it's never for the benefit of humanity. It's for what's going to line up their pockets. But we're fed up. I think people are fed up of this. We're tired of the corruption and the lies, and knowing that it's never going to get better. It's only ever going to get worse. Now they're not even hiding what they're doing. They're just doing it openly, and like, you're going to accept it because we got away with it so far. And it's funny that they're telling us that these specific people are governing you in the wrong direction. And it's funny that's number 2 on their list in 1987 to boot.
Yes. And people only see the Republicans fighting against Democrats and vice versa. But what they don't see is that there's a group of people, financiers or secret society members, like running everything behind the scenes, pulling the strings, like making the
Like
politicians.
a Bilderberg's sort of theory or idea.
Not in the book, but Michel de Marquet was told that there are 12 families running everything behind the scenes. And this is politicians, the number 2 danger. Number 1 danger is actually money, because if you look at the different industries, like the energy industry, we had clean energy already. Stanley Meyer invented the car that ran on water, and he just died mysteriously. Also about the education industry, and everything is revolved around money. Similarly, the pharmaceutical industry, and they know the ways to cure cancer or to cure diabetes, but they don't disclose them, and they encourage people to rely on their drugs or chemotherapies and things like that. Journalists and drugs, number 3, because journalists only report sensational news to get more circulation and more views. And it's related to money too. And the negative news sells, like the bad news sells. So that's why it's so important to know that the negative news harms our psyche, and we should focus on the positive news, the more kind of the news that can improve our psyche, because that's the important thing that we should focus on. So people interested in that could do research and look up the website, the Good News Network, and they report on positive news. And drugs, what they mean by drugs are the hallucinogenic drugs, like psychedelics. I don't know about you, but a lot of people in the spiritual communities, they want to try the spiritual experience. Those are artificial experiences. And if they want to elevate their psyche and have psychic abilities, they should do that naturally. They shouldn't rely on artificial drugs or psychedelics to do that, because they would harm the astral body of the person trying to do so.
That's so interesting, because it seems to conflict with what a lot of the people who actually have these experiences think, like when they take mushrooms or ayahuasca or peyote or something. I mean, those are natural. Those are, they grow here. And I don't think they at least experience it as, I mean, I've had psychedelic experiences, and I don't see the danger that it's caused. It's interesting that journalism and drugs get grouped together for him. Why is that?
I don't know why they group it together, but those are like equivalent on the same level of dangerousness. But I would want to, I didn't believe that psychedelics were harmful to the human body, so I sought for proof. We don't see auras normally, but I asked the aura readers, people who can see the human energy fields, the auras of people. I asked them, like, if you see any changes after a person takes psychedelics or drugs, they say yes, their auras look very ugly after they take them. So this is kind of like a proof or something that validates the claim of this book. But I think is people can do everything they want to, but if they want to like be a little bit cautious, they might want to ask our readers about the effects of psychedelics.
Can I ask why you believe this story?
Because the book has specific verifiable facts that I was able to validate and verify. For example, it talks about the tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan. I didn't know about that. I did some research on the internet and found that indeed there's a tomb of Jesus in Japan that people can still visit, and explains why there's no record of Jesus performing any miracles in the Bible before the age of 30. Because he went to India and died in Japan. That's the Jesus who was born from the Virgin Mary, from the embryo implanted by the ETs, in order to fulfill the prophecy and just to show the people that someone extraordinary was going to be born this way.
Oh, wait, was he himself an alien on this story? Or
Not
was
that Jesus,
he
not the Jesus born from the Virgin Mary, not the one that died in Japan, buried in the tomb of Jesus in Shingo Village, Japan. Not that Jesus, but Christ was an ET who actually
there are
took
two
on.
people on this theory? They're two
Yes,
different
there were two beings, one Jesus, one Christ. Yes,
they lived at the same time? They
yes,
inhabited the
they
same body?
overlapped, and there's an overlap of time. They made a body of Jesus that appeared and resembled the Jesus who went to Japan. And then the ET from Thioba took on that body of Jesus made by them and then performed all the miracles.
Okay, so what do you do? So you're a lawyer, right? You have a JD and you deal with like evidence and questions about like a proof and inference and things. What do you do with a person? Oh my God, what is going on? Just did
It's the Zoom features, like if you do a thumbs up, it
Thanks.
does a thumbs up,
I
but it
did
only
something-
does it on your screen.
and an
That's
explosion of fireworks just happened, which I mean,
You went
my
like this.
astral body projecting. If I can do it again. Okay, what do you do with a person like me who just doesn't believe a single word of it? I just don't see why I should believe all these things. And it also seems to me like the product of a mind that is manic. I mean, we have this diagnosis of sort of manic psychosis, and one of the really common products of this is that your mind just starts stitching together as many things as it can and explains them all in this increasingly fantastical Byzantine elaborate web of sort of not exactly conspiracy, but it's like this very fragile crystal of lines connecting everything, like a pinboard. Like when you see a movie and like a person's just crazy out of their mind and they've got like strings going to everything, that's what it feels like to me. Does it not feel like that to you? Does that not just like kind of taste of illness or something?
Yeah, it does feel like that. Actually, the first time I read this book, I didn't believe anything in the book the first time I read it until I read the chapter on who is Christ. The part on Jesus and Christ really shocked me, and I actually did a lot of research on that. I came from China, and I didn't really believe in any of the stories in the Bible because they were just too kind of mystical and too good to be true. I thought those are just fiction stories, the stories in the Bible. I believed none of the nonsense, but I went to church and listened to the teachings of the pastors and
In China, you
here
did?
in the U.S. after I came
Oh,
here.
okay, okay.
Yeah. And mostly for social reasons and to establish my business network. I was really into making money at that time. And
Who isn't?
That's
Yeah.
why Americans go to church. It's no different. I mean, people
Right.
don't really believe most of them, I don't
Right.
think.
But I also had a question in my mind, like Jesus was just when he began preaching, when he saw his mother, he didn't say like mother. He didn't call his mother. He called
Woman.
her woman. Yes, that's a big puzzle to me because to a Chinese person, that's just so kind of disrespectful to one's mother. You call your mother woman? Why is like? And also, I'm a linguist. I study all the languages. Like, it's just impossible for any language in the world that would mix up mother and woman because there's just a special relationship between a mother and the son. It's impossible just to mix the two words together. And that explains why this story, like by Michel de Marquet, connects the dots, explaining why there is no record of Jesus performing miracles before the age of 30, before he began
Or doing really anything between when he's like 12 and 30.
Right.
It's kind of ambiguous. I mean, there are like lost gospel sort of traditions and Gnostic traditions and things, but not in the canonical Bible do we have anything about Jesus's middle life or adolescence, really, before he's 30.
His young man years is just non-existent. We don't know anything about him. Yeah.
Right. And suddenly he became this omnipotent human being, like a person, like Son of God, preaching everything that's so profound and performing all the miracles. And suddenly that just happened. And that was always like a puzzle to me. And also there's some people like say like Jesus went to India. And I was curious about like why like that's the case. And this story like connects all the dots. I also mentioned about the Star of Bethlehem, like it's actually a UFO, like a spacecraft, and actually that connects the dots of the astronomical records of China, because China kept a very thorough astronomical record,
Sure.
and there was kind of a record of a star like a comet staying in the sky for 70 days in the latter Han Dynasty. And actually, I wrote a paper on that. I can send it to you as well.
Yeah, there are a lot of fairly interesting and not implausible explanations for the sort of astrological signs and things that kind of populate Christian history. I mean, just to give some background for listeners, the story that Samuel is referring to, where Jesus refers to Mary as woman, is probably the very first miracle story, where Jesus goes to a feast. It's a wedding, and the people run out of wine because they're probably means they're poor. And Mary, Jesus's mother, instructs him, says, go fix this, go take care of this. And he says, "Oh, woman, it's not my time yet." I think something like that. Or why do you ask this of me? But then he goes and does it. And there's some interesting scholarship over that particular turn of phrase, "Woman, why are you asking this of me?" It doesn't seem to call for a hefty explanation. I mean, it doesn't seem to call for like a really elaborate theory of why, of like Jesus's mother wasn't really his mother. Is that kind of the explanation? Like that's why he refers to her as woman, because they're like two different kinds of metaphysical being or something?
That was actually the mother of Jesus, born from the Virgin Mary,
But not
but it's not
Christ.
the mother of Christ. So
Wait,
that
so Mary, the mother of Jesus, is not the Virgin Mary?
is the Virgin Mary, but she is not the mother of Christ who performed the miracles.
I see.
Oh, so you're saying there's two different entities. There's
Yes.
one predating the miracles and then one after the miracles.
Exactly.
Is there a reason why, or at least did Michel ever mention as to why the 30-year gap in between the two?
But he didn't really say why there's a 30-year gap, but he explained why they did this, why have sent two beings to Earth to preach about spirituality and love and reincarnation, is that the first Jesus was just born just to show people someone extraordinary was going to be born to fulfill the prophecy. But he couldn't perform miracles, because when the astral body goes into the physical embryo, it would have to pass through what the ancient Nagas would call the river of oblivion, forgetting all the things that happened in the past lives, forgetting all the knowledge that the astral body learned from the past. So that Jesus couldn't perform miracles. But as you know, people in the past as well as people nowadays, they're highly skeptical. They have to see something miraculous happening in order to believe the things that preached by the person. So this is why they have to send a second being, Christ, to us to perform miracles so that his teachings will be believed by the locals, by the people. And so this is why Christ performed all the miracles as documented in the Bible. And actually, when Michel de Marquet was with the Theobans, they performed all the miracles as performed by Christ. So they were able to communicate through telepathy. They were able to heal all the problems, all the diseases. They were able to levitate. They were able to manifest or materialize objects. So they did everything that as performed the miracles as performed by Christ. So, and they're very beautiful beings, like highly compassionate and loving people, blonde, 9 or 10 foot tall, always in their 30s. They never age because they can regenerate their body tissues at will, because they're highly spiritual and intelligent. They have all the knowledge, and they can do all the things that we think as magic. So this is how they are.
And Samuel, are these akin to, let's say, what people describe as the Nordics, like the tall, pale, blonde-looking, blue-eyed people?
They certainly look like the Nordics, except that they're much taller and they're hermaphrodites, meaning that they have both male and female sexual organs. So they don't need to find a partner or a wife or husband to marry. They can have a child or baby born at their will. So this is when they told Michel de Marquet this, Michel being like a male French man, he was highly disappointed because he wanted to be with Anna Vance.
Tabarnak. I can see that. Yeah.
Oh,
That
that's
is
hilarious.
not right. Yeah.
But well, it's interesting because that sort of jives with all of the there are several ancient myths. I just have to say I don't believe any of this. This is just not does not strike me as plausible. Partially because if their explanation for like sending Jesus back or sending a person to perform miracles so that people believe this message, why are we asked to believe this message simply based on a book written by a Frenchman, instead of giving like miraculous signs or something that would convince us of believing this? But it is interesting because there are all these resonances, which I guess I'm doing the very thing that I think he's doing, which is finding all these sort of synchronicities and resonances between different like old belief systems and things. Like the hermaphrodite thing strikes me as resonant of some indigenous mythologies in which people were originally all hermaphroditic, and we sort of split off and became two different. So I think the Dogon people in Africa have this belief system, and there's a story in Plato when they're having this sort of, I think it's in the Symposium, or maybe the Theaetetus or something, where they're talking about these sort of old views of humans, and like people used to just be two of us, and we had forearms and forelegs and both male and female genitals before we split off and things. It's kind of fantastical, but like it is resonant of like deeper sort of archetypal ways of thinking about human history. And I certainly can agree with the general message of the book, but it doesn't seem like you need all of these really fantastical stories or like grand elaborate theories of human history in order to preach the message. Like you could just say like we need to get off of sort of capitalism or something, and there are really compelling arguments to be made for that view without having to be like, oh, in the Bible the way the pyramids were built was by the Lemurians or whatever it is. Like that seems to almost distract from the larger issue if like we're going to ruin the planet with pollution and obsessing over capital and political sort of mistakes and things like that. Like why do those things need to go together? Why can't we just make the argument in a more sound way? Don't they know how to make these arguments? Like you're a lawyer, you know how to make arguments. Don't they know how to make arguments?
They're laying foundations. So they laid a lot of foundations on where we came about, the history of mankind on Earth and also on other planets, and why so many paranormals and mysteries and mysterious things occur on Earth, so that we can really kind of connect the dots and believe more the concepts kind of described in the book. I mean, they could have just
like I'm not seeing the connection. Can you connect this for me? Like all the innate weirdness of human experience, which I do believe in. I think that the world is a much more weird and inexplicable place than our kind of like consensus scientific materialist view of reality would allow for. I do believe that. But then on the other hand, you're saying that's kind of the foundation for this more enlightened view that's more peaceful and more spiritual and less money oriented and less drug addled. How do those connect? Like I really don't see why one needs the other or why one even supports the other.
So we can learn the lessons from the history, because we did have several resets in the past where great civilizations were lost, whether by human actions or by natural disasters. We can learn from the past and to make ourselves more kind of into the future, like a better ways to live in the future. And also, they could have just told us the lessons, spiritual lessons, focused on spirituality, but that wouldn't make this book so unique, because even in the late 80s, there were a lot of books like already saying the same thing, but they were so much into the general concepts, not into the specific details as laid out in this book. This book gives us specific actions required by the people to make things better in the future. It talks about nonviolent resistance. It talks about how we can do that through collective consciousness. It's through knowledge, spiritual knowledge. And also, it talks about all the things that were happening in the world in the past during World War II, in which they actually intervened, preventing Germany from being the first country to develop the atomic bomb. In a sense, they helped the US government at that time because they believed that the US government was more sincere in protecting or ensuring individual liberties.
Do you think they regretted it after we went and like evaporated two cities off the face?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
Hiroshima and
Who gave them
Nagasaki
the
were
green
not like
card?
morally
Yeah.
justified decisions, I don't think.
they helped the lesser of the two devils, the
You know,
two evils. Yes.
the thing is, this is why this intrigued me. And I was mentioning this earlier in the podcast, is that when we're talking about, contactees, abductees, like there are some differences. Abductees usually are people that throughout their lifetimes, they're taken repeatedly to some sort of medical experiment. Sometimes they're taught things or meant to fly the craft, then brought back. But specifically in the case of Michel Desmarquet and, of course, my boy David Hamill, which was, again, this was in British Columbia. And I was mentioning that to you previously there, Samuel. So this David Hamill is a very similar story to
I
Michelle
got it's
here,
like
Michael.
75 miles from you.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
there's
yeah,
like
it's like
literally
right up there.
40 minutes away from me.
Yeah, sure.
But on October 12th of 1975, now already he was in his, again, late 50s, if not early 60s, when this occurrence happened to him. He's watching TV at home with his wife. His wife she was born a cripple by, at birth. But they're always together watching TV. And all of a sudden the TV goes, it does like a snowy image, and two dots on the image start coming forward and brighter, and they get out of the TV and they form into two entities in front of them. And they approach him right away and they say, "We're going to take you up now." And he doesn't know what he's talking about. They put a hand on him and he goes right through the roof of his house. He sees every beam, in between the joisting, all the insulation. He sees all of that on his way through, as if his body doesn't mean anything. But the crazy part about this is that they flew him 2,000 kilometers away to Ontario instantaneously. And they showed him this piece of land specifically. They said, "You need to come here and buy this piece of land," and had a swamp or a small lake on it. And they told him, "You have work that we need you to do here." He bought the piece of land. He went to Ontario, found the place, bought it, and he started building a flying saucer in the garage all the way till his late 80s, where he died.
He started building a flying saucer like of his own?
Magnetic of his own. And dude, you should see his research. It's holy shit. The drawings that he's done, his explanation of how time and space and that, dude, the guy's 80. He got that information only 20 years ago and he was 60. Until that point, everybody considered him an idiot. Nobody ever paid attention to him. And only when he died, they said, "Look, whatever happened to him, he was onto something." There's an actual thing called the Hamill hammer that was created by David Hamill. It's called the Hamill, Hamill hammer. Amazing conceptual art. And again, this is why I wanted to have you on, Samuel, is that I've been obsessed with David Hamill's case, because I'm like, what? Why? Why are people so late in life told, "Hey, you need to do this"? Well, dude, you should have got me when I was like 20 years younger, right? But it's like, no, there's like specific times. Or people that, Michael, you and I have talked to people that get these downloads, or they're all of a sudden able to understand, geometry, geology, and things that they could never understand before. They're considered idiots in these fields. And all of a sudden they're keeping up with professors. It's like, that is evidence. Now you could say, well, it's a fluke. Maybe somebody just woke up at the age of 60 or something years old and became super intelligent to write all the stuff that you've been covering, Samuel. But what are the odds that is happening over and over again on different continents?
Yeah, and the fact not only that a person wakes up and has sort of this new elaborate set of knowledge or interest or whatever, I don't know if it's knowledge, but also that they tend to kind of gravitate in similar directions of like these maybe ethereal or I don't know, grand philosophical kind of stories about humanity and our place in the world is pretty interesting to me, because it's not exactly religion. Like you would expect people, if they suddenly became really just like deeply concerned with existential questions, that they gravitate to like the most proximate religious tradition, which I'm sure people do. But it is interesting to find all these people who go in a different way and to make it about, I don't know, aliens or space travel or whatever.
But that's the thing with like, if I was to do it, like you just brought up a good point, Michael. If I was to do it, I would go to Christianity, something that gives me comfort.
Yeah.
These bloody guys don't do that. There's no comfort in
Like, no,
anything they say, right?
Maria
So,
and hermaphrodites.
yeah. So this is, and I think we should do a part 2 to this to understand that more of, obviously, on your research and what you've done, but the fact that you've translated this. Before we close, I'm just curious. It's a bestseller in China, in Taiwan. What has been your experience since you've translated this book, and what's the outreach that you're getting from our Asian friends on the opposite side? Like, what are they saying? Yeah.
China and Taiwan are two different countries with two different ideologies. And in China, more people are starting to realize what the government was doing to them, and they're starting to do their own investigations. So people in China are waking up. Taiwan, on the other hand, people have already been awakened to a certain extent, and they're more open to this idea of ET visits and spirituality. And I think that Taiwan should be the model for China, and in the future, so that China can become like Taiwan, more democratic, more elevated spiritually. So I think it's a.
Did you think that way while you were in China, or did it take a while for you to leave China and then sort of come to that conclusion?
That's my hope. I hope that China can become like a Taiwan. But I do see there are a lot of complications get in the way. I just personally, I love Taiwan so much that I just want Taiwan to be the role model for all the countries in Asia or something like that. I just cannot say enough good things about Taiwan. But China, on the other hand, is so repressed that I think it needs a lot of work, grassroots level, on the grassroots level. And I think major revolutions all come from the grassroots level. So it's never the top-down approach. It's always the bottom-up approach that works. So I think similarly, the disclosures and also things happening in the US and Canada will be based on the same thing at the grassroots level. So the people need to wake up. This is the solution for the future of the mankind, is that we need to work together through concerted actions, using nonviolent resistance to make things happen. Because if we really kind of think about it, the people like us, we will lose very little if we have a strike. But the power, I mean, the financiers, the major corporations, they will lose humongously if we don't work for them anymore, if we don't slave ourselves to them. So this is a way to go in the future, but that requires knowledge and concerted actions.
Do you think it's easier for ideas like these about extraterrestrials or whatever it is to take root in a place like China than it is for a religion to take root, or are they sort of equally discouraged? I mean, I know religion is officially discouraged by the party, but what about ideas like this?
I think, by human nature, religion is probably easier to take root in China than the ideas of ET visits, because people want to rely on someone else to develop this kind of ability and
because God's going to save us in the religion, but it's like we have to save us in the other story.
Exactly, we have to look inside for answers. So this is the gist of.
That's a good observation. I like that.
But is it socially like forbidden to entertain ideas like this in the way that it's socially forbidden to, say, become a Christian or a Muslim or something?
It is socially forbidden in China right now. It is still socially forbidden to say anything about the ET visits, and this kind of paranormal is strongly discouraged by the Chinese government. So this is the reason why this book is published as a science fiction in China. But that serves the purpose.
Oh, did not know that. You had to publish under science fiction.
Yes.
Oh, wow. That's, we were talking about that, Michael, how, people across the world are experiencing this, but you don't really hear anything from China or certain countries like India. But again, it depends on what is the culture. If the culture does not allow you to talk about the fact that you're being taken every other month by some sort of entities from not this world, you're never going to talk about to your family, your friends. You die with your secrets. And these are entire countries that are told and discouraged from ever disclosing this. I often say that the UFO movement is a lot like the Me Too movement, right? The Me
Hmm.
Too had thousands of people in the wings waiting for that one person to
Oh, I
step
see.
forward and start the ball going. And it's the same thing with this UFO issue is that, we keep hearing about all these military interceptions or interventions with these. That's men and women that flew on those crafts that experienced it, that have never stepped forward and told us. We know they were there. We know there was a helicopter or a plane that chased it, but you'll never hear from the pilot. What happens when they land? Who goes and visits them right away? And you're talking about hundreds, thousands of people that have experienced something like this that have been told to shut up. So we keep thinking, the government is the one that knows. They know nothing. But the military personnel, the individuals, and in this case, in Michel Desmarquet's case, it's civilians that are experiencing this. It is coming from us. We don't need government to disclose shit because we know already. We are
We
the
also
one
don't need
experiencing
them.
it.
We don't need the government to tell us to shut up either, because there's like social sort of stigma against it that keeps. It's like makes me think of like Whitley Strieber when he wrote Contact, and then like he gets so many letters. I think he said he had to stop counting letters he got from people when they got to 500,000 of them from people who were like, this very similar thing happened to
In
me.
the 80s.
Yeah, but
In the
when he
80s.
published the
Yeah.
novel, everybody initially thought, "Who the hell? What is this? This is crazy." But apparently, there's lots of people who at least read it and think that that they had an experience that was similar to that. So that's so fascinating that it's so different in China. I wonder what the novel, quote, novel that you translated and published is apparently spreading. What sort of responses are you getting from it?
70% of the people believe everything written in the book is true. And the other 15%, half true, half not true, and the rest just not true at all. Just some people have different levels of awareness, or some people have old souls, some people have younger souls. Like I think in China, a lot of people have old souls too. So they just, but most of those people are not very high social status. Those are just common people like students or people who just work daily, and they're not in power. So I think it takes time for something to happen in China.
There's
You
also
know,
these. Oh, am I running? Am I running over time?
no, go
Well,
ahead.
I was going to ask. There are these traditions in Chinese literature. I'm not even sure I can articulate it right. Of like they're like wonder tales. I think they're sometimes
Yeah,
called by
yeah.
writers like Pu Songling and
Mhm.
Ji Yun and things. Or do you think that that's kind of and wonder tales are just like tales of what we would think of as Forteana, just like these impossible things that happen to people, and you have these kind of collected volumes of hundreds of them. Is that kind of like the framework within which people are interpreting this story that you've published? It's like a wonder tale that happened to a Frenchman in Australia, or is it more like religion to them, or science, or
It's more like a validation because the Wonder Tales mostly talk about ghosts that seek for revenge or contribution or something like that. Um, but this book actually explains what ghosts are in a more scientific way. Um, if you look at the Ghostbusters, you're going to see that they are able to track down some of the evidence of ghosts. And this book actually explains the reason how they're able to use certain devices to be able to capture ghosts. Ghosts. Yeah, maybe we can have a part 2 to explain what this.
You
Yeah,
have to.
definitely.
Well, that's the thing with a book like that. You have to, because when you try to condense it into even an hour and a half, sometimes if a book is massive, a lot of details, you're skipping through a lot of things and just hitting the key points. And unfortunately, then people are just like, oh, well, they're all over the place, right? And I'm sure we're probably getting that from some of the viewers watching this right now.
Also, a good reason to go buy the book and read it, because it's going to make a more maybe cohesive, connections between all of these things.
Good point. Yeah, and Samuel was asking me if I had a chance to read the book, and of course I didn't, because I just booked Samuel this week, and I was like, no, let's just get the episode out. But I read every book from every guest that come on. They normally send me their books, and I just received one yesterday that I'm going through right now. But that's what I do, because I want to know, exactly what was the author's experience, because sometimes you could articulate it so well when you write it. And Michael, you're a writer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When you write it, you just, oh, it's perfect. But when you say it verbally, it's just garbage. And it's like you can't use the lexicon and verbal, communication skills that you would like to communicate the idea. And I'm an extreme, expert in this field. I put my foot in my mouth all the time, and I say things I don't mean to. But this is something that, to me, I was, because of the David Hamill situation that I was already aware of, and I've always been fascinated by his case. I'm like, I've never heard of that. And then when I heard about what your book and what you've written about with Michel Desmarquet, I'm like, holy crap. Like, what are the odds that these two, like the similarities, both in the military, both French, both get visitations way later in life, when they're both living at some place, which David moved from Quebec to BC, and he had his encounter in BC. He told him to move to Ontario. Michel was in France and moved to Africa for a while, worked there in the military, then moved to Australia, and you find him in Australia, not France. So, like I said, it's just these things that always, they boggle my mind. Like they find people exactly when they need to be found. And that's the part that, to me, is like, okay, so are we being monitored the whole time, or do they know in advance? Like, if you have advanced, time travel technology, well, in a 5:15, Michael's going to be alone in the house. Let's go get him, right? That. So there's so many questions, and obviously, we're going to delve more into Desmarquet's book, and subsequently his marriage that fell apart, which of course is another theme we hear quite a bit from.
That's super common thing with
Super.
abductee experiences.
Yeah, and how can it not? Like, if somebody has, it's not just a life altering, it's a consciousness altering.
Yeah, you become
experience.
obsessed with it, and people don't accept you, and it's just it's a whole mess.
But that's, to me, that's evidence. If an author just wrote a book and he always had it easy, he's making tons of money, you're like, he's in it for the money. But if the guy's marriage fell apart, never made any money off the book, but has crazy things, that just read the book. At least you could be skeptical, but just read the bloody thing. Like, the guy wrecked his life to do it, right? Samuel, where can we find you, and what are you working on?
Yeah, so people can find me on Facebook, Samuel Chong, CHONG, and people can follow me because I'm waiting for my bar exam results in May. That's going to come up in May, but hopefully I'm going to build up more credibility and become a messenger for this book and for the future, for the better future of humanity, because it's not just one thing for the Chinese or for the Americans, for the Canadians. It's for everyone on Earth. It's the humanity, the future of humanity is at stake. So I'm going to be devoting a lot of my time and energy and helping people to get their acts together and change the future for the better.